Oh, hi, local main character Zep here. I was just taking a cold shower to cool down from the psychotic episode earlier today. I had what some might call a mental breakdown and a complete lapse of personality and character earlier today because, well, I'll just show you.
Hey, what's today's date?
August 11th, 2022.
Oh.
Zep, what are you doing?
The animated BeyWheelz series first aired 10 years ago today, leaving many people with the question, okay? And unlike someone who's seen a single breast in their life, I have 10 years worth of thoughts on that, unfortunately. Airing at the time was Metal Fight Beyblade, which was immensely popular in the States and, well, really everywhere else in the world. Of course, this led Hasbro, the people who localized Beyblade internationally for the toy market, to make a lot of toy spin-offs. There was Tornado Battlers, Electro Battlers, Stealth Battlers, RC Electro Battlers, Romeo Battlers. A lot of battlers, really. Of course, all this money made Hasbro go mad with power, and in a gambit to make even more money, they decided to make a Beyblade spin-off. Possibly to reach a new audience, or to make tires. Imagine all your favorite Metal Fight bays like Pegasus, Leon, Destroyer, and Kerbex made by Goodyear. So, then Hasbro released BeyWheelz based on Beyblades released up to their Metal Masters lines, and Nelvana commissioned a 13-episode animated series to be aired on Cartoon Network. That begs a question. Was BeyWheelz just bad, or was it just not good? I mean, it certainly left an impact on people. I mean, I have non-virgins to this day ask me, remember when they turned Beyblades into tires? Wasn't that silly? And I have to say, unfortunately, yes, I've never seen a vagina. A lot of media franchises have the possibility to resurrect their fandoms nowadays. So, does BeyWheelz have a possibility to do that? Let's discuss. BeyWheelz first hit the shelves in July 2012, alongside other Beyblade products that undoubtedly sold better. There was the single pack, which included a BeyWheelz launcher, a ripcord, and a code card corresponding to the BeyWheelz to be redeemed in the online game, more about that later, for $12.99. The dual pack, which included 2 BeyWheelz, 2 launchers, 2 ripcords, and 2 corresponding code cards for the online game, more about that later, for $21.99. The Crash Course Battle Pack, which was the capstone product of the year, which included everything that 2 players needed to start playing BeyWheelz, for $39.99. And there are stadiums that were larger than the one included in the Crash Course Battle Pack, sold separately for $9.99. Please note that the standard price for a Beyblade around this time was $8.99, so price was not an incentive to buy a BeyWheelz over a Beyblade, or preferably in Hasbro's mind, buy a Beyblade and a BeyWheelz. But how Hasbro did incentivize you to buy BeyWheelz was their advertised play value. With Beyblades, you can only battle in one way, but with BeyWheelz, you can do crash battles, speed battles, and stunt battles. What do those mean? Your guess is as good as mine. The BeyWheelz themselves are separated into 3 main types. Power types, which are thick, heavy, and have a textured tread, and throw other BeyWheelz out of the way in crash battles. Speed types, which are thin, light, have smoother treads, and are usually good for races. And by extension, I guess there's balance type, which is much less of its own type, and just what happens when a BeyWheelz is a centrist. In order to launch the BeyWheelz, simply load it onto the launcher, hold it perpendicular to the ground, and push the launcher off the ripcord. This will cause the BeyWheelz to zoom off, probably into a TV or other things that it could use to cause property damage. Every launcher they release, that is to say the one, can only be held in your left hand and the ripcord held in your right, so that's probably bad for handedness, although I don't know if it lends a benefit to left-handed people or right-handed people due to the way you launch it. So again, just like a centrist, BeyWheelz has picked a side, but it's not sure which one. BeyWheelz are split into 4 main parts, which are very similar to the Metal Fight era Beyblades. First, there's the Spirit Axle, which is analogous to the face bolt on Metal Fight era Beyblades. This screws the Beyblade together, and unlike Metal Fight era Beyblades, you don't need a special tool to screw it in. Hey, that's one entire positive for BeyWheelz. The other one is that it ended. If there's a third positive, it's probably a test for chlamydia. The Spirit Axle has a pretty little picture that represents the spirit that the BeyWheelz is supposed to represent. And they usually come in 2 main flavors, normal and oh my god. Yeah, I think I'm positive for chlamydia now too. The Spirit Shield is like the energy ring or the crystal wheel of this whole deal. It's what gives the BeyWheelz the name of the spirit it's based off of, but it doesn't lend much else. The name Shield implies it defends against attacks, but it doesn't protrude from the BeyWheelz enough to actually do anything, and also, I don't think it's going to be hit much from that angle if they're supposed to crash head-on. I guess it's for weight distribution, but even then, it's very light. It's also how you attach it onto the BeyWheelz launcher, so I guess that's another positive? Next up is the attack gear, which, much like the Spirit Shield, says it does something that it's physically not capable of doing. The name suggests it's some kind of weapon for attacking the other Bey, but it doesn't work that way. It protrudes further than the Spirit Shield, but not by much. I think the only thing that would happen if it hit the other opposing Bey, if anything, is destabilize yours and make it go off track. If anything, since they're usually bigger than the Spirit Shield, I guess it's more weight, but that just means that the BeyWheelz is going to be more lopsided, so, The purpose that it actually serves in the BeyWheelz is to act as the nut that fastens onto the end of the Spirit Axle and holds the entire BeyWheelz together, making it the worst part of the BeyWheelz because it allows it to exist. Finally, we have the energy core, and without much exaggeration, this is the only important part of the BeyWheelz. It is the eponymous wheels of the BeyWheelz and determines almost all of the Bey's behavior alone. Being an anime tire, they come in a lot of silly shapes and sizes that have different effects. Speed-type energy cores are usually large in diameter, thin, smooth-treaded, and generally light. Speed-type treads don't always have to be smooth because sometimes they're abominations against God. Power-type cores are, in contrast, thick. They're also heavy, smaller in diameter, and have a really pronounced tread. This looks like what a Jeep tire would look like in a DMT hallucination. Even the packaging acknowledges that this is the only important part of the BeyWheelz. The energy core has a much larger weight in the stat array than any other part, meaning that the BeyWheelz type is entirely determined by the energy core, which makes sense. It's the tire. It's what makes contact with the ground, the opponent's Beys, and determines the weight and speed of the entire combo. I guess if you were to compare this to a part on a Metal Fight Bey, it would be the metal wheel, the track, and the bottom fused together. Compared to the energy core, everything else is just cosmetic. It's not much of a customizable battling toy if only one piece actually is customizable and affects the performance of the damn thing, when everything else just makes it look pretty, if you could call it that. In the design space of a BeyWheelz, that means there's only one slider that actually matters, which isn't good. All of the BeyWheelz feel samey, and I don't exactly blame them. They're tires. But then you have to remember, why would you make a customizable battling game with an object that behaves in only one way? All BeyWheelz fall onto an axis of either heavy or fast and fall somewhere along that spectrum, meaning the two niches are the extremes, and that's really boring. Beyblades can be a lot of things and serve a lot of different purposes, just due to the complex physics interactions that you have in a battling top game. But a battling wheel game doesn't have those, because a battling wheel game doesn't exist and shouldn't. So how does one internationally large toy company make a battling wheel game? It's not exactly the widely explored market that battling top games are, since, that's been around since the dawn of humanity. So how did they conceptualize a game that shouldn't possibly exist? Well, they didn't. Instead of having one cohesive game, they provided 3 separate ways to battle. First on the docket are speed battles, which are, well, they're a race. It's the most sensible thing to do with wheels that spin fast, but It really just means that the one with the wider diameter wins, since that's the one that can cover the most ground due to, physics. It's all fine and good and all, but there's no interactivity in it, which is a shame because that's one of the main appeals of a customizable battling game, to see how all of these different pieces interact with each other. Instead, building for a race battle just seems like picking the best parts without even having to consider what the opponent will bring to the battle. And since it's a choice of what the best parts are, every competitive combo, if there were competitive scenes for BeyWheelz, would probably be the same. There's no official rulings on what the finish line should be or how far away you should be from it, so that's up to the players. But I will note, in the first episode of the anime, there's a type of race battle shown where they aim the BeyWheelz at each other, and if they happen to collide in the middle, it will become a crash battle and will use the crash battle rules to decide who wins, which might have been a better way to include interactivity into the game. But it would also make it tougher to tell who actually won the race since they are going towards separate finish lines. Maybe not the best idea. Following speed battles are crash battles, which were really pushed by the advertising. Visually, they're the most exciting because thing crash into other thing, and people generally like that. This type of battle are the closest ones to having actual rules. There's even multiple bullet points in the instruction manual about them. The stadiums that they sold for BeyWheelz were mostly for the crash battles, since the main area of them were dedicated to this zone where BeyWheelz could crash into each other. If they collide in the middle, the winner's decided in one of two ways. If they both stop, the BeyWheelz that is closer to the point of collision wins. If one of them keeps on rolling, however, that one wins. And I assume that means if both of them are rolling after the collision, the one that rolls for longer wins, but the rules aren't clear on that or anything else, so that's just a guess. If they don't collide, the match is a tie. Do you see the problem? If is the understatement of 2012, and they said the world was going to end. Unfortunately for us, it continued. It is incredibly difficult to get these things to hit each other, even if you're at a point-blank range. Forget about using the arena. It's tough enough to get these things to hit each other, much less go inside a small entrance. That's a euphemism of some kind. Rarely will a BeyWheel ever travel into a straight line due to how lopsided their weight is, so even if you're aiming perfectly, the chances of them actually hitting each other are still low. This being a tie state makes ties as common in crash battles as they are in tic-tac-toe. And even if they do hit, how are you going to determine a winner in a fair and just way? The point of collision is an invisible spot. There's no way to track it unless if you have an instant replay camera pointed at this game. Now, Beyblade may be familiar with that at this point due to how much stamina types, well, do their thing too well in the current metagame, but without any way to visually track where the collision is? This game's kinda tough for kids to decide who won. If kids actually played with this toy, I could see a lot of playground arguments sprouting on who won a crash battle. That is, if they could get them to hit each other in the first place. Now, stunt battles have the least descriptive names of all of the battle types, so let's go to the instructions and just read off what they have to say. Stunt battles. Perform stunts using the Bay Arena TM rights registered or Crash Course Battle Set TM rights registered, each sold separately. Battle with your friends and see who can do the most awesome stunts. And, oh, that's it. So, there are no rules, I guess. The rules are, there literally are no rules. Okay. So are you supposed to just, play chicken? Are you supposed to grab an impartial judge to judge who does the most awesome stunts? That's the only fair way to do this, or way to do this in general, I'd think. So the designer's solution to a fair form of battle that would use both the unique properties of speed type and power types and everything in between was to not make up a game at all and just say do whatever. I guess that works for a design solution of allowing speed types and power types to do their thing by letting them do things. undefined. The battle types for BeyWheelz are creatively bankrupt. It really seems like they thought of the most basic things you could do with wheels, that is, race them, crash them into each other, and I guess do stunts, and then designed the product line, and only tried to make those things into games after all of the BeyWheelz were designed. It's clear that they had an idea of speed types and power types during the design process, as power types and speed types all share enough elements to define them in their types clearly, but as for a broader idea of what the product line itself was supposed to be, it's just not there. To lend some evidence that they had no idea what they were doing with the BeyWheelz toy line, we can look to the anime, where every kind of battle, crash battle, stunt battle, and speed battle, are brought up in the first episode, but very rarely used in specific in later episodes, with most battles usually devolving into some kind of crash battle, even if they're a race. Stunt battles specifically were so poorly defined to the anime staff that they just made them into crash battles in an obstacle course. There are no differences in the rules to crash battles and stunt battles in the anime. They are essentially the same things in different courses. The types of battles we ended up with were clearly all bad ideas. Speed battles have no interactivity. You know, one of the main draws of Beyblade, the thing that the series is riding off the coattails of. Crash battles are entirely impossible to run due to the difficulty of crashing the BeyWheelz together or determining a winner when they do, and stunt battles are too vague to even consider a battle type. They're more of a play pattern than anything else. If Hasbro already wanted to have different kinds of battle types, why not just steal from the Beat 'em On franchise, the series that they were already working on at the time and had worked on in the earlier 2000s, although they did purposely fail it both times, but that's a conspiracy theory of mine. They didn't feature the toys at all in the 2013 commercials, they wanted it to fail. If you don't know about Beat 'em On, they're this marble shooting toy that have been in Japan since 1993, originally being based off Bomberman, but slowly transitioning into a competitive battle toy like Beyblade. Beat 'em On, unlike Beyblade, don't have a main battle type, instead usually having a variety of games depending on the season, with kids encouraged to come up with their own as well. The various types of games allow Beat 'em On and Beat 'em On accessories to flourish in different occasions. And more importantly, it allows them to sell a bunch of play sets. I think even Hasbro knew that this was a good idea, because in the sequel to BeyWheelz, Bay Raiders, they had separate play sets that all played differently. Although BeyWheelz did release a separate playset from the Crash Course battle set in the standard stadium. The Ripshot battle set, which was this weird V-shaped track that allowed the BeyWheelz to easily crash into each other. Now, making crash battles actually achievable is all well and good, but the design of BeyWheelz doesn't really allow for stadium sets to be all that useful. Due to BeyWheelz being a fast tire, they don't really work well in confined spaces, especially not indoors. Maybe pins or targets would have been a good thing to release? At least those would allow you to hone your aim and have some kind of game of skill, but any kind of strategy would still be missing. If you wanted to buy anything that wasn't a big capstone set for accessories for BeyWheelz, it was the stadiums, which came in 2 colors and had 2 different textures, but they were too minute to actually do anything to the BeyWheelz movements, and they also had, like, ring out pockets on them for some reason. I don't think those are going to do anything. They also have ramps, which I assume are for stunt battles to, you know, stunt off of. The stadiums didn't work too well as ramps because they were made out of thin polystyrene, just like base stadiums, so they would get knocked away by any BeyWheelz that dared hit them, or at least slid across the floor by some great degree. So yeah, the BeyWheelz accessories weren't really well designed for BeyWheelz in mind. The launchers were very hit or miss. They were lightweight and they felt trinkety, but the ripcords were really good quality. There was no mechanism to stop the prongs from spinning once the ripcord left the launcher, and some people think that this is good for Beyblade launching. So naturally, you'd be inclined to use the BeyWheelz launcher on a Beyblade, but you can't? Even though the launching mechanism seems identical to Metal Fight Beyblades, it's the wrong size. Yet another reason why a Beyblade fan wouldn't want to buy BeyWheelz. They aren't even getting a product that's compatible with the stuff they already have. Even Bay Raiders had better interconnectivity with Beyblade than BeyWheelz. You could use your Beyblade grips on the Bay Raiders launchers. No one asked for that, but you can. But even something as simple as a nearly identical launcher can't work with the main product line and give you a reason to pick up BeyWheelz. And even though the launchers felt like they could break apart at any moment, the main toy was still worse. I mean, sure, it felt solid as rubber can feel, but there's a major design flaw. They're bad. You can customize a BeyWheel all you want, but it won't feel special. Unlike Beyblade parts that all have some kind of gimmick or special play feature because of physics interactions, BeyWheelz parts are designed with aesthetic in mind first. Instead of being designed to do any specific feature, it's designed to look like a ram, or whatever this is. They're absolutely devoid of any unique play features. With such a focus on speed and power, you'd think that the battles wouldn't go as slow and weak. Well, the battles aren't slow themselves. In fact, they're quite fast, lasting less than 6 seconds, and incredibly boring. It's just that the process around them is slow, since you have to pick up the BeyWheel after every time you launch it, and they can go quite a ways. Unlike Beat 'em On or Beyblade, where their games take place in a confined space, BeyWheelz really need a large space to do the battle types that they advertise, so the cleanup takes longer than the battles, and that is a problem. With other collectible battle toys, part of the main gameplay loop is being able to pick up your toys right after the battle ends and go again. That's what makes it simple and addictive to pick up and play. BeyWheelz are neither of those. Even if the battles themselves weren't that special, if the customization aspect were deep and strategic, you could at least forgive it because that would be the main gameplay, the customization, and not the boring battles. But as I said before, the customization doesn't mean anything, so there's nothing here to really entice players to experiment with the game or even play it. There is no reason to interact with the main forms of play that Hasbro set out for BeyWheelz, so it's left up to players to make up their own. That's confounding, however, because Hasbro already found a way to make wheels exciting and didn't use it in this toy line. Also released in July 2012 as an original part to Hasbro's Beyblade product line was the Destroyer Dome. It's a special spherical stadium that's either based off of the anime or Hasbro made the anime based on it. Hasbro was really gung-ho about the Destroyer Dome, so much and so that they forced Cartoon Network to air the Destroyer Dome episode of Beyblade Metal Fury first, out of order from the rest of the series. They aired episodes 15 to 17 of a 39 episode series before episode 1 because they wanted to sell a sphere. In this sphere, Beyblades with special tire-shaped spin tracks would enter through 2 holes. They would ride around the edge of the sphere and crash into each other, with the last Beyblade still riding around the edge of the sphere, winning the game. If your Beyblade landed at the bottom of the stadium and stopped moving, it was game over. Essentially, it's better BeyWheelz without BeyWheelz involved at all. And seeing as the tagline to BeyWheelz is powered by Beyblade, I can't see why this part of Beyblade couldn't have powered the entire BeyWheelz product line. The Destroyer Dome was one of Beyblade's killer apps for 2012 and released the same time as BeyWheelz, but the holes on the Destroyer Dome are too small to work with BeyWheelz. This seems like the product to integrate with BeyWheelz, and I am sure that they designed the Destroyer Dome after getting to start to work on BeyWheelz. Why they couldn't make it compatible and give a reason for Beyblade fans to buy BeyWheelz, I have no idea. The confined space would make the gameplay loop a lot more tight, with the BeyWheelz actually being able to make contact and not having to be picked up from a far distance away after use. The attack gears and the spirit shields would actually make contact. The energy cores would have a purpose for their different treads. It seems like the perfect solution for all of BeyWheelz' problems. I'd go as far to say that Destroyer Dome compatibility would justify the entire brand's existence. Although BeyWheelz might be too heavy and chunky to actually work with the Destroyer Dome. Unless if you could shrink them down a little bit, therefore making them cheaper and giving them an excuse to be bought. Hasbro releasing Beyblade but tires twice in the exact same month makes it clear to me that BeyWheelz were a desperate attempt to capture the lightning in a bottle that Beyblade did without relying on Takara Tomy. The designers were so preoccupied with making wheels, a spinning object like a Beyblade, into its own battle toy that they never considered why they should make it a battle toy or how a good battle toy actually works. They had a concept for a toy that they wanted to stick with, and they were making it into a battle toy, whether that idea worked or not. In Beyblade, the product is designed around the game you're supposed to use it in. In BeyWheelz, they tried to make a game out of the product. It makes the design of the toy feel really shallow, because it's just a shambling husk of a battle toy, not a battle toy itself. No part of the BeyWheelz are designed with fun interactions in mind like Beyblades. They're just designed to look cool. And arguably, they really fail at that. So if BeyWheelz aren't designed for battle, then what kind of play patterns are they suited for? With such great focus on racing, crashing, and doing stunts, BeyWheelz really seemed like they're designed to be a sandbox action toy like Flywheels. BeyWheelz were just much more suited for sandbox action play than they were for battle play. While their wacky shapes didn't lend themselves for interesting interactions in battle, they did lend themselves to interesting interactions with different surfaces and obstacles for stunts and trick shots, which, may I remind you, are not a competitive game within themselves, but a play pattern. What I mean by sandbox action play is an open-ended form of play pattern where kids can grab different obstacles and objects from around their house to create their own stunt courses for their action toy to play on. So for BeyWheelz, they can make ramps and targets and what have you, or just take them to the park and ramp them up a slide or something. I know this play pattern is viable because that's what I did with my BeyWheelz as a kid. No one wanted to battle them, and even when we tried, they just didn't work. So our little baby minds just went to the idea of making obstacle courses with foam blocks, or just going to the park and using the play equipment for stunts. Any games that we did play with the BeyWheelz couldn't really be used as a competitive game because the rules were so loose because they were made up by kids. The closest thing to a competitive game that you could play with BeyWheelz, I guess, is bowling. We played bowling. We took one of those cheap bowling sets with the hollow pins and just used BeyWheelz as the ball. I suppose you could also play some kind of golf game with them, or bocce, or maybe a target hitting game. Stuff that Hasbro really couldn't make any play sets for because they're open outdoor games. BeyWheelz actually work better as an outdoor toy than they do an indoor toy because they don't risk breaking any fragile objects you have in the house, like knocking down a lamp or a TV. Although I don't recommend playing with them on a street. I've heard of too many people losing their BeyWheelz down storm drains on the street. Like, too common. It is a nigh universal experience for people who aren't me. Which really shows how often people just played with these outside because that's the only thing you can do with them. Their gaudy colors even kind of lend to their outdoor playability because you can find them pretty easily. Hasbro was obsessed with making their Beyblade products look like a 2007 rave during this time period, so they were pretty easy to spot whether you wanted to or not. These colors certainly don't occur in nature, so wherever they land, you'll know. Maybe BeyWheelz, if they weren't going to change their form factor, should have leaned more into the outdoor toy marketing. They're the perfect size to fit into kids' pockets when they're going to the park, or to school, or a friend's house, or wherever. I don't know where kids go, I'm not one of them. Which is both keeping the install base interacting with the product and advertising. The different surfaces and inclines that outdoor and sandbox play provides also really would have worked with the different treads and weight distributions of the BeyWheelz. It would have given customization an actual purpose. Kids could have built different BeyWheelz for different stunts. All of that is to say, I'm just describing flywheels right now. That's what I've been doing. Flywheels are these toys that are based off of tires that you put onto a ripcord-based launcher and you launch to do stunts. Sound familiar? The only practical difference between flywheels and BeyWheelz is that flywheels don't feel like they're going to fall apart at a passing glance. And flywheels' designs are based off of actual tires instead of whatever the hell these are. There's some novelty to the aesthetics of flywheels. It's like a tire just flew off of a vehicle and started doing its own stunts, whereas BeyWheelz look like a gallon of PCP flew into my bloodstream. Flywheels are also incredibly cheaper than BeyWheelz. In the year of our Lord, 2022, when I'm recording this video, a standard set of flywheels will cost you around $11.99 USD, which includes 2 flywheels and a pretty substantial launcher. For a refresher, a standard BeyWheelz set cost $12.99 USD in 2012, not adjusted for inflation, and only came with 1 BeyWheelz and 1 dinky launcher. Adjusted for inflation, that's $16 and 54 US cents in 2022. It wasn't even like you were getting a good launcher with the BeyWheelz, they were incredibly dinky. The flywheels get that honkin' thing, look at that! And if you consider that the BeyWheelz were right next to the $8.99 USD Beyblades on US shelves, and flywheels were just straight up cheaper, who were they trying to make their install base? Who were they selling to? Was it Beyblade fans? Yeah, it has the Beyblade branding on the box, but it doesn't share any of the fun parts of Beyblade, like deep customization, a low barrier to entry, and, a competitive game that actually functions for a battle toy. Was it non-Beyblade fans? Powered by Beyblade is literally right there on the package. Flywheels have more of a general vehicle branding, sometimes having tires for specific cars or tire brands, so they'll undoubtedly hit a wider audience in the action toy sphere. So, who was this for? No one. It was for no one. BeyWheelz is a product made to sell more toys and take up more shelf space. Beyblade's own popularity must have made Hasbro want to make their own battle toy, since everyone was making their own battle toy around that time. Jakks Pacific tried to make Monsuno, Ninjago had some kind of battle game at the time, so Hasbro, even though they were on top of the game, must have wanted in. But by doing that, they started competing with themselves. Instead of making the Bey series battle toy infrastructure ecosystem that they wanted, they made a product that tried to compete with Beyblades as a battle toy, and was woefully ill-equipped to even start to challenge it. They lost the battle the moment they entered these woods. The very core idea of the product is so uninspired, or should I say very inspired, by flywheels. Inspiration here is a euphemism for stealing. Hasbro wanted to make another Beyblade. They saw a spinning product that was powered by a ripcord launcher, and they made it a battle toy, whether it was equipped to do that or not. And as the answer commonly is with BeyWheelz, or not was the final result. Hasbro sent BeyWheelz out to production with the most bare-bones ideas for games that didn't even have an iota of the thought that usually gets put into a Beyblade system. BeyWheelz are stuck in a form factor that remind you of a better sandbox action toy, and are covered in a coat of paint that reminds you of a better battle toy. BeyWheelz are a strange dichotomy of arrogance and lack of confidence. While Hasbro had the gall to think they could literally reinvent the wheel and sell it under the Beyblade branding successfully, they weren't confident enough in the idea to allow it to stand on its own and affix the Powered by Beyblade tagline. The framing as Powered by Beyblade didn't add an air of familiarity as Hasbro had hoped, but rather drew comparison to the much better toy line. In the end, on the toy side of things, there was no target audience for BeyWheelz. And even if there was, I don't think they would want the product they got. Okay, so the toys were bad, there's no other way to put it. But maybe the show still has a wheel in this race, is what I would say if the time weren't now later. Yeah, remember the BeyWheelz online game? I'll talk about that later. Well, now is later, so I'll talk about that now. For Metal Fight Beyblade, every Beyblade product would come with code cards that you could redeem for an identical Beyblade and its parts on the online game. The online game was a multiplayer online flash game that you could play with other players across the world. Since, Beyblade is a very local sport, since you have to have a physical object that has unique interactions because it takes up physical space, so unlike a card game, you can't easily play it online. I don't think that webcam Beyblading would have the same effect as webcam dueling. The online game was a solution for that exact problem. Even if a kid couldn't play Beyblade in real life against another player, they could go online and use the Beyblades that they've collected to battle other players across the world. It was kind of nice, I think. The battles online were also supposed to represent the anime a lot better since you could use special moves and have some control over your Beyblade, which also made it a game and not a gambling simulator. This in-browser game would prove popular enough that Hasbro would recreate it as an app for Beyblade Burst. Although, admittedly, the Beyblade Burst game looks a bit better since it's CG models instead of Flash. But it also now has microtransactions, so, oops. At least for the new Burst app, you don't actually have to buy the Beyblades, you can just scan a QR code that people make publicly available immediately after a Beyblade releases, so hey, that's something. In 2012, the online game library would grow to include both modes for the Destroyer Dome and BeyWheelz. The Destroyer Dome was a fair bit more advanced than the other games on the website, since it used Flash's 3D capabilities. BeyWheelz, on the other hand, used all reliable PNGs of the product. BeyWheelz gameplay started with you choosing a stunt to end the battle with, similar to how you would choose a play in Tecmo Bowl. Yes, that's a reference I'm using, I've made my peace with it. Using the stats provided by the BeyWheelz that you chose at the beginning, I guess, you would then play a minigame to gain more speed for the crash at the end by playing Excitebike. This is Excitebike. I think they had a thing for NES games. You'd have a speed gauge. It would go up by hitting boosts and go down by crashing into obstacles. At the end, there's a ramp that sent you over a pit of Nickelodeon slime where you would crash into your opponent with the stunt that you chose at the beginning of the battle, which may or may not have affected how well you did at the end, but I honestly cannot tell. Usually, whoever had the highest speed gauge from the Excitebike minigame would win. Best 2 out of 3 wins the set. I think the game looks good. Not good in like the fun way, but good as in the it's something way. I'm impressed that they include elements of speed battles, crash battles, and stunt battles in one cohesive game. I'm not impressed on a game design or technical level, more that the people who made this game had a better understanding of how to make a cohesive product line than the people who made the BeyWheelz themselves. The real-life games run into a Monsuno problem where there's too many games to play with the product and none of them share much gameplay elements mechanically. Similar to how in Monsuno, how they had a bunch of different rules for how to use the toys and the cards, to the point where it was really confusing what you were buying the products for. This Flash game somehow incorporated all of the play features cohesively of BeyWheelz. Speed, collision, trick shots. Honestly, I wish the real-life game showed that kind of cohesion. Maybe they could have elaborated on that whole track idea more that they showed in the Ripshot battle set, but hey, dead horse is a dead horse. And no matter how many times I beat it, it won't make a noise. Only I'll make a noise, and that sound is gentle weeping. Using code cards from BeyWheelz products, you could unlock more parts in BeyWheelz. Using these parts, you could customize your own BeyWheelz for battles. Seeing as the stat points always added up to the same total and there was only 2 stats, I don't imagine that this process was all that engaging. Overall, the game was short and playable enough to get some worth out of the BeyWheelz you bought. The game also has the honor of being the only form of BeyWheelz gameplay that you can consistently tell a winner. You might not think that's impressive, but I once put that on my resume and the interviewers immediately called me out for lying. So it is, by dictionary definition, technically an achievement. The BeyWheelz online game, it wasn't the worst thing about the franchise. Well, as that was the intermission, that was your chance to get up, use the bathroom, eat some food, escape. So it's time to move on to the 13-episode BeyWheelz animated miniseries, which is undoubtedly one of the things about this franchise. BeyWheelz, of course, had a tie-in anime to advertise the toys, because what is a toy if not an opportunity for a multimedia franchise? Nelvana commissioned a 13-episode-long animated miniseries to be aired before Beyblade Metal Fury, or Metal Fight Beyblade 4D's English dub if you're insufferable. These 13 episodes, when combined with Metal Fury's 39 episodes, made a 52-episode-long season to air on Cartoon Network. Metal Fight Beyblade 4D technically had 52 episodes, but a good slew of those were half episodes that were combined when dubbed. Synergy SP animated the series. They're the studio responsible for hobby anime such as the rest of Metal Fight Beyblade, the Crossfight Beat-em-on series, Scan-to-Go, B-Saga, and then some shows you'd actually care about. The show centers on Team Estrella, a world champion BeyWheelz team, and their struggle to defeat the evil Dominators who seek to take over the BeyWheelz world, whatever that means. Like any Beyblade villain group, they're a cult of domestic terrorists. Is the show actually good? Or is it as devoid of any heart as the toy line it advertises? Well, there's a bad precedent for shows called BeyWheelz powered by Beyblade, so I'll let you gamble on that shot. Unlike some media, BeyWheelz has characters. You wouldn't get that out of How It's Made. The BeyWheelz characters even have designs. How It's Made is getting decimated right now. The designs, however, seem kind of weak when compared to Takafumi Adachi's designs for Metal Fight Beyblade proper. All of them seem to lack that spark that makes the aesthetic of the Metal Fight characters' ridiculous designs work. They seem like mass-produced imitations of those designs rather than something someone wanted to design. They hit all of the marks of the Metal Fight characters, that being needless colors, needless belts, needless clothing, look stupid, but not in a way that feels charming like Metal Fight, but in a way where the details feel printed on flat like a cheap doll. It's done out of trying to reproduce those designs to capitalize on a pre-existing fan base, rather than trying to pay homage to the series' progenitor. Their version of Blader DJ got beat really hard by the anime stick. Regular Blader DJ looks like this. Wheeler DJ looks like this. I almost like his design, but the MFB tales they included detract from the charm of the usual Blader DJs, who are literally just a guy. Wheeler DJ is more than a guy, he's an anime. I think Blader DJs that aren't based on a real person are just destined to fail. They almost lean too hard into the MFB aesthetic tropes as bandages for the designs rather than using them as a reference. It's the first sign that this series is too scared to travel outside of the safety of the Metal Fight series, as it knows it needs its recognition value to survive. It couldn't be that much different from Metal Fight, so the creative direction took that to the natural endpoint. It couldn't do anything new at all. The characters and their roles in the series aren't anything new, certainly. Barring 3 characters, all of them are static copies of 1 or 2 archetypes, Paragon protagonist or rotten villain. Every character can be explained away rather quickly. Sho Tenma is the Ginga Hagane of Metal Fight from the series, and he's a BeyWheelz world champion. He has Soaring Wing Pegasus and no personality outside of the technical definition of the word protagonist. He does the morally right thing all of the time, and not much of anything else, like having even a single character quirk. I guess he says he wants to swim once. He's the de facto leader of Team Estrella because he owns Pegasus, and that's what the main character of a Metal Fight series owns, most of the time. Jinryu is the user of Doomfire Drago. Unlike the l-drago user from Metal Fight, Jin is boring, and a besmirchment to the name of edgy Beyblade Dragon Men. He's the serious lancer of the group, and by that I mean he's a carbon copy of Sho that sometimes has ideas to move the plot forward, or shoots down others that won't. He thought that Bay NASCAR was silly once, I guess, so that means he's serious. Even though Bay NASCAR makes more sense as an in-universe game than the X-game garbage he plays, if you're a fan of vague martial arts shadowboxing, then man, you are in for a treat. An okay treat. Leon Fierce is Kyoya without the Pharaoh madness that made Kyoya fun. Instead, he's just sort of grumpy all the time. He's sort of like Sho and Jin, except he's never won a world championship, and he's miffed about that in one episode. Apparently, this is due to undefined anger issue that he overcame in the same episode they're introduced in, only for him to lose the fight, dampening his character growth. His BeyWheelz is Wildfang Leon, which is a fact as interesting as his character arc. Kofi Horn is a great value version of a hypothetical great value Benkei. He's freakishly big, but like in an uncomfortable way, where the cartoonishness fades away and just question his anatomy and biology. He used to be a wild wheeler called the Strong-Armed Outlaw, but got put in his place by the usuals of a Beyblade gym in a random western town. After Leon saves his gym from Lemmy Koopa, he joins Team Estrella, After that, he's mostly a boring paragon, but they tried to do the Benkyo character dynamic, except it's not reciprocated and comes off as bargain bin yandere.
Nice to meet you, Leon.
Same. Hold the phone! Look here, Miss Nicole. Leon doesn't just shake hands with anybody, you know. I'm the only one who can shake hands with Leon. Only me, see?
Is that so?
Don't be ridiculous. Hi there. but no! Leon and Nicole look too cozy. Radar on, dude.
My Leon will never hit the heights of my Kiyoya. Rampage Stomper Bull is the last BeyWheelz I'll name because now the characters stop being based off specific Beyblade users, instead just character roles. Marche Ovis is Kenta and Madoka combined. He's tiny and has a computer that allows him to do exposition dumps. He works in a pair with Nicole Spears, local woman who eats potato chips and is implied to be headstrong until she becomes another blind paragon. They're rivals at first, but put their differences aside to team up against Sho and Ryu before joining Team Estrella and never battling as individuals again. They win one featured match against named characters, and it's because they get helped out by others. They are extremely bland and may have been intended to be the non-light complexioned male rep, but to quote my friend Mark, what is the tan Aryan boy with the pouty lip doing? They're not good at representing anything, which is a shame because that would have been one thing this show had going for it, and that's Team Estrella. Whereas the main characters have the personality of an 80s cartoon hero without their main quirk that makes them remotely tolerable, the villain team, the Dominators, makes carbon copies of the same two characters. They are either normal evil or Joker evil.
And it will. Scorpio and I will tear him into itty-bitty pieces.
Our first Dominator, Jake, is the Joker-fied Gigante of Lemmy Koopa. He delights in tormenting his opponents and killing this one child. He's really summed up in this one clip.
I love seeing someone's sad, silly face when they lose to me. I love their little trembling chins and runny noses when they cry. Ooh, it gives me the chills. You're not well.
He, like the other Joker archetype character Sting, has a BeyWheelz that burrows itself underground.
How dare you interfere with my favorite part of the battle, little boy?
Sting is who they get when they can't use Jake and is functionally identical to him. The one defining difference is that he loses his important match in the series via Beyblade crucifixion in media, so he falls victim to the series' Beyblade torture scene.
Leave my Scorpio alone! You people aren't well!
Every Beyblade era has at least one. The normal evil characters are Glenn and David, who contrary to popular belief are not a pair of Mormon missionaries. They're ruthless wheelers who both manipulate heat and fire in their battles. You can tell them apart very simply. David has a little brother who is one of the two halfway interesting characters in the series, and you can identify Glenn is Red. Acting as the shadowy masked figures who are the public face of Dominator's command are leaders A and B. That sums them up pretty well. They cackle and give commands at times. Mysteriously, they have the same hair colors as the assistants of the totally not evil Ryan Gladstone. I'm sure it's a coincidence. Speaking of Ryan Gladstone, we aren't. Let's put a pin in Ryan from Dream for now. I'm putting a pin in this the same way they put nails into the hands of Christ.
It's no use!
There are two interesting characters in the entire show, both from the Dominators. Interesting, in this case, is the same interesting you'd say when you'd come home to find your street missing. Interesting. Odin and Gigante are the only characters to go through character arcs on screen. Leon solving his anger issues does not count, because his character fundamentally stays the same, Grumpy Saltine, which is great, since his cohorts' personalities are saltines without any salt. Teens, I suppose. Odin's arc is kinda neat for BeyWheelz standards. Yeah, the math checks out, that's the meanest compliment anyone can give. He was a wheeler, bullied as a child, that had to get stronger to survive the mean streets of Dissection City, a name so stupid that I'm just going to call it the city from Sonic Riders from now on. He trained and became so strong that nobody could beat him. Unluckily for him, the top is the loneliest place to be if there's no one tailing you. Odin's heart became empty, seeking excitement, so when he was offered enrollment into a domestic terrorist cell in exchange for the promise of strong opponents, he accepted. All because BeyWheelz was a solved game to him. Also, shout out to Real Blood. When he finally gets to face off one-on-one with Sho at the end of the tournament arc, he forgoes the usual rigged stadiums that the rest of his team used in previous rounds for a closed cage match with Sho's Pegasus. What follows is the closest thing to an exciting fight in the series, which allows Odin to feel again and leave the Dominators in the final battle. The battle gets so interesting that the crowd starts to cheer for both sides, even though one of those sides has shown the capacity and compulsion to destroy everything they love as a domestic terrorist cell for the entire series up to this point. But hey, death of the wheeler and all that. Sho wins because he's the main character and Odin thanks him. Sho basically says, "I know you're a domestic terrorist and all, but that was a great hustle out there." They're in probationary friend status now. The loner too strong for their own good trope is played out by this point, and probably was in 2012 too. It's usually used as a spice to put on your lovely edgy rival, rather than its only crutch, but seeing as it's a crutch at all, Odin stands up much better than the rest of the cast. Well, with one exception. He's not particularly a deep character, or even one that's unique, but he's at least a character that's been fleshed out at all. The only character that excels more than him is Gigante, the younger brother of David. Two names that, if not for the David and Goliath joke, exemplify the anime character to youth pastor name dichotomy in the Dominators. You got your Odins and your Stings, but also your Jakes and Glens. Half of this team should look like Josh Groban if we're going by names alone. Gigante is introduced as a normal evil type villain, but witnesses Sting in his one obligatory Beyblade torture scene and starts to question if what he's doing is morally sound. He's told to take Sting's torture as motivation to win no matter what. And later, in his match of the tournament arc, David sacrifices his BeyWheelz by launching it into Estrella's bays. So when the same people his brother defeated by using him as a sacrificial lamb make their protagonist friendship speech while fighting the Dominators in a final gambit, he takes it to heart and joins Estrella. It reminds Gigante of the reason he started BeyWheelz, to have fun and get stronger with his big brother. He never wanted to join the Dominators, but did so anyways to be with his big bro. David, on the other hand, feels betrayed. He tried his best to make sure Gigante made it through the Dominators' training regiment, eventually making them both official top members of the program. He renounces their brotherhood and dubs him an enemy. Eventually, Estrella's newbie trio and Gigante beat the Dominators together. While the bit where the characters go on about how Team Estrella are all friends and how that's how they won is objectively wrong because these characters barely have any chemistry, mostly in part due to them not having any character traits at all, I like Gigante joining the good guys and David not being forgiven or changing. If this part were more fleshed out and done with actual characters, it could actually be a really powerful story about not needing to reconcile with bad familial relationships and striking out on your own with the help of good friends. But it wasn't that. It may have been that conceptually, but it came off as standard shonen villain adoption in the end. With that being our show's most well-written character, we can tell character drama is not the show's strong point. It's just its less weak point because battles are even worse. As this is a hobby anime and to some extent a battle shonen, the battling toys take up much of the focus. Whereas Metal Fight Beyblade spiced up the concept of spinning top battles, which are already fun to watch and has survived as a popular form of childhood entertainment for hundreds, if not thousands of years, BeyWheelz tries to make tires hitting each other exciting. BeyWheelz does not make use of any of the elements that could make tires exciting, like intricate races that evoke the outlandishness of Speed Racer F-Zero, but rips off Metal Fight wholesale. Every fight is choreographed like a Metal Fight battle, which doesn't work well because we're looking at tires. While the series claims to have 3 different kinds of battles, every fight boils down to making the tires hit each other until one stops spinning, usually with added anime nonsense. That works with Beyblade. Spinning tops act like boxers or martial artists circling around the arena until they finally exchange blows. Just like real fighters, you can tell how much fight they have left in them by how fast they're spinning or if they're processing. When that's extrapolated to Dragon Ball Z, that makes sense. It's an exaggeration of the same basic fight choreography. When that's done with tires without adequate adjustment for the form factor, it's stupid. Wheels spin, but it's not like they have stamina like tops. Tops are known for spinning for a long time without a motor. Wheels famously are not. It gets worse when the BeyWheelz start turning or doing donuts. I mean, Beyblades can wave dash in the anime, but it's still just an exaggeration of the real movement. BeyWheelz can't turn. They can barely go straight! They essentially take battles from Metal Fight Beyblade but sub out the model for one on its side and, well, that's BeyWheelz. So a lot of the fights just become awkward slugfests, even if they're supposed to be focused on races or stunts. A great majority of races are decided by KO, a climactic battle between two speed types is just done through crash battle, and every stunt battle, regardless of set pieces, is still just a crash battle with extra steps. Since every battle's decided by the wheels hitting each other, and a free spinning wheel stamina loss is demonstrated by loss of speed in the real world, the battles are just meaningless exchanging of blows until one wheel suddenly pops over dead, or rubble falls on them. Or not! The battles aren't even helped by the spectacle of any interesting powers. Metal Fight really gets out there with its special moves, turning ground into sand, making illusions with air pressure, shadow clone jutsu, opening a portal to hell, and of course, terrorism. BeyWheelz have considerably fewer abilities than that, like fire, digging, going fast, doing donuts, and winning if they're ever knocked into the air. They also try to bring pseudoscience into the fray, as Beyblade does, but not in the same JoJo I read this fun fact on the back of a Snapple cap way that's internally consistent for the fight, but in an explain real physics in close proximity of breaking those same laws of physics way. In the races, Nicole and Marche make the use of a slipstream chain to go faster. It's their one trick. Using the pocket of reduced air resistance that BeyWheelz creates when going down a straightaway, another BeyWheelz can ride in that slipstream of air to reduce the air resistance acting upon it and gain speed to pass the bay it's trailing. Two bays on a team repeatedly use each other's slipstreams to gain speed and pass each other. It's somewhat clever, if not impractical. However, the concept of slipstream in Formula 1, where BeyWheelz borrows it from, works because the cars are aerodynamically shaped. BeyWheelz aren't, and would create a slipstream of turbulent, dirty air behind them, most likely creating the opposite effect than intended. Also, in the same fight, Soaring Wing Pegasus, by exact wording,
grabs hold of the air somehow and zooms down,
completely voiding the idea of air resistance being a thing that works normally in this universe. In another fight, they have a BeyWheelz that moves too fast to see, DBZ style, making dive bomb attacks from the air. Sho is able to dodge them because, quote, things fall at the same speed. Well, they mean acceleration, but that's true if you're talking about real-world objects that aren't BeyWheelz. Every time a BeyWheelz is knocked into the air in this series, they can, for the most part, move freely and fall at a rate as fast as they want because they can grab onto the air somehow. This falling at the same rate line is also stupid because we're not only worrying about its velocity perpendicular to the ground, but also its velocity parallel to the ground, which is where most of its attack power comes from. It still has a lot of velocity parallel to the ground. That's how it's ramming into the side of the BeyWheelz. The BeyWheelz velocity in that axis is what's making it hard to track, not the falling speed. And the falling speed is only useful to know if you know how high it's going to be jumping, so it just falls apart all around. Also, 10 seconds later, they ride ropes made out of electricity, so I don't see why they're so insistent on bringing science into this if they aren't even going to be consistent with their own fake science rules. Fake anime science isn't that hard. We've been adhering to the rules of physics while also breaking them in every imaginable way since at least JoJo in the 80s. And in a broader sense, Gundam in the late 70s, and probably far, far before that with Astro Boy in the 50s and 60s. You just gotta stay consistent with your own broken rules. Verisimilitude matters, not realism. BeyWheelz ultimately chooses to highlight the wrong aspects of its toy to advertise in order to emulate the success of the main series in its battles. They use the laziest Beyblade fight choreography ever conceived, compromised further because the audience is literally watching tires cockfighting. All of which is a bummer because it is the main resolution of how problems are solved in the series. The meat of the series is just a chore to watch, which is hard to fix even with the best writing possible, which the series doesn't have. But what makes BeyWheelz a genuinely terrible experience is not the paper-thin characters or the uninspired battles, but a single character and the implications he has on those elements. Time to unplug those stigmata! Ryan Gladstone, henceforth known as Ryan from Dream, is the cancerous growth that spreads to every lymph node in the series. He's the CEO of Dream, the WBBA of BeyWheelz. He's the twist villain of this series, if you couldn't tell from the scene in the intro. Heterochromia, surname Gladstone, evil little throne he sits on, currency that has his face on it, use of the Bay Kerbex representing Cerberus, the guard dog of hell. Way that base sits in a trophy on his desk to lament over it. Past traumatic injury that keeps him from wheeling. The way he says wheeling.
Wheelers.
The Dream Secretary's shared color scheme with the villains. The fact that he's just Damien Hart, a villain from Metal Fight, but designed worse. Ryan from Dream holds the key to diagnosing everything wrong with the series, as his existence actively drags down every other character with him into a downward spiral only a turd in a toilet could take. He is the mastermind behind the plot of the show. I use mastermind here as a series of letters and not a word that has meaning. So let's dive into Ryan's backstory, which is essentially the whole plot of the series. I'm usually averse to just expositing the plot of a series exactly, but doing that is the most damning review I can give it, and hopefully convince you to never think about BeyWheelz ever again. Many years ago, when Ryan from Dream looked exactly the way he does now, which is really confusing since he either looks like he's 12 or an old man, and that rules out both of those options, he was in much the same position as Odin. Ryan was a jaded champion, and not a single challenger was able to match his BeyWheelz genius. He wanted to have a battle with meaning. This is his motivation. Please take note. Craving excitement to stave off the general ennui of being an edgy anime boy, he goes to do research on the history of BeyWheelz, their origins, and their development. Shout out to BeyWheel Nazca Lines! In his research, he found the origin of all bays, even beyond BeyWheelz, and how they developed out of a magical celestial object called the Star Fragment. BeyWheelz are only one of the forms bays took in the world. But that doesn't quite matter, because first we need to talk about parallel universes. Following the ancient research paper trail of the other type of bay, he finds a shrine where a gate to another world containing a new type of bay is. He tries to activate it, but unfortunately the conditions weren't quite right, and he injures his hand and gets cursed-induced heterochromia. His injury prevents him from holding a launcher, and therefore wheeling, although I feel like that's an incredibly easy accessibility issue to overcome. One that he does later on via gauntlet that straps a launcher to his hand. Was the world of wheeling just that ableist? His dreams of finding meaning in his own battles come to an end, so then he comes up with a scheme to have another wheeler take his place at the top and live vicariously through them. Ryan from Dream is a dance mom. Ryan starts Dream, an organization to promote the sport of BeyWheelz and cultivate players through competitive play. I think if he wanted to live vicariously through others, his plan could have ended here, but the plot demands him to be evil despite where any of his motivations or logical inclinations may actually lie. So, at the same time, he searches all over the city from Sonic Riders to create an evil team of wheelers. Using harsh techniques, not unlike those used on Ivan Drago and Rocky, he creates a team of artificially raised wheelers as an experimental group to go up against the wheelers that train freely for competitive play pushed by Dream. His main goal in creating these dominators was to find out if his quote artificial methods or the natural methods were the way to train the ultimate wheeler. To discover which group was stronger, he devised a giant globally televised 5-day-long tournament that would pit the strongest natural players versus the dominators. Why it needs to be 5 days long, I don't know, because the matches are 5 to 8 minutes long most of the time, and that seems like a lot of hassle to fill a stadium for matches that short. From a practical standpoint, the writers probably put in that time for downtime between characters, but even the first tournament arc in Beyblade 2000 had downtime between same-day matches. It's not that big a deal, I just think it would be a mess logistically. Like, what if the tournament ends on day 3? What happens to the rest of the event? They have entertainment every day, they had cheerleaders, like, do they just get fired? Do they at least get the money? Are they getting any money? Although he wasn't sure if the tournament would be enough on its own, so he had the Dominators act as domestic terrorists across the city. Usually when I say domestic terrorist when regarding Beyblade series, I use it jokingly. They're usually just mysticism cults. But here the Dominators are committing actual terror attacks for stated political gain, which they say is to control Dream and the BeyWheelz world as a whole, whatever that means. So these guys who joined an extreme sports team were just down for domestic terrorism. I guess they're under the constant threat of being tortured, definitely making this some kind of cult, but the series never really goes into the implications of the Dominator's hostage state and just plays them off as plain evil. These acts of BeyWheelz-related evil were meant to make the most pure-hearted of the natural wheelers want to fight the Dominators at full force. It's a roundabout way of doing that, and I think messing with the variables of the experiment, but I'll allow it for science. This would culminate in a showdown between whatever do-gooders there may be, in this case Team Estrella, and the top members of the Dominators for control of Dream and the whole BeyWheelz world. Whenever I say BeyWheelz world, I cannot stress enough that I am referring to the literal state of the hobby in universe, and not political control over the planet's nations. We are talking about taking over the NBA. The true purpose of this showdown, however, is to be a gambit to propose the main Judgment Bay tournament. This thing hinges way too much on the main characters losing this. Plot structure-wise, it makes sense to have the heroes lose to the villains at least once to show the bad guys' abilities, but story-wise, it makes no sense to do this little song and dance, as it is a huge, impossible risk. To dive into this sub-scheme further, how it went out in reality is that Ryan from Dream had the leaders of the Dominators send a challenge to the top wheelers in the world, Team Estrella, for control over Dream, after Team Estrella had at least one run-in with the Dominators. There are the first two big ifs in this plan. What if Team Estrella says no to this? I suppose they'll threaten more terror attacks, but that involve these athletes caring? Luckily they do, but even then, they have no reason to believe that the Dominators are going to stop terrorizing the city when they get what they want. If number 2, what if Dream doesn't cooperate? Since Ryan is the head of the Dominators and Dream, he knows Dream will cooperate, but the outside world has no reason to think Dream, which is heavily funded, has any reason to bow down to terror threats. It's not insane to connect the heavily funded terror group and the large corporation they interact with doing nothing to stop them, right? By some miracle, Team Estrella accepts the challenge, which Ryan tells Estrella to back down from? If number 3, what if Estrella does back down when the most powerful man they know tells them to? Luckily for Ryan from Dream, they don't. This was a ploy to clear Ryan from suspicion from not only the characters, but the real-world audience. In character, if he's in on this plan, he has no reason to jeopardize it like this, especially if he's a perfectly logical mastermind type. He can act like he's hesitant to the idea of Estrella fighting the Dominators to feign his own innocence, but he shouldn't try to stop his own plan directly like this. Team Estrella are then to go to a secluded arena for the next phase. There, they'll fight the Dominators' top wheelers in a final battle, or so they think. But the Dominators know that this isn't a final battle, but a venue to use dirty tactics to beat Estrella, so they'll want a fair match. If number 4, what if they accept the loss, or, God forbid, win? But as there is no loving god in the universe of BeyWheelz, Ryan's plans work, and the leaders propose the elaborate Judgment Bay tournament, which would be in a public location, in a probably Dream-owned venue where police will be, who would have to be told not to arrest the domestic terrorists there. If number 5, what if any party involved says no to the tournament? If number 6, what if people connect Dream and the Dominators now, since logically, they'd have to cooperate to make this tournament happen? But no wrenches are thrown, and all goes according to Keikaku, which on the writer's end is to make the show move forward, but on the actual in-character end, it makes every party involved look like idiots. Ryan for making such an iffy plan, Estrella for agreeing, the public for watching this go down like nothing fishy is going on, the Dominators members for thinking this plan would work. This plan isn't unfolding because of clever plotting, it's unfolding due to divine intervention, i.e. the writers. So the Judgment Bay tournament is on, and both groups are given a week to prepare. Team Estrella has to find more members to fill out the 5-match format, which I guess doesn't permit repeat performances. So Ryan gambles another time on Estrella doing this based only on his wheeler intuition. So, once the tournament actually comes to pass, the Dominators are allowed to cheat, if not encouraged to? They select arenas to help their own BeyWheelz for the entire tournament, except for Odin, who asks for the fair match. It makes sense why the Dominators' wheelers would want to do this, they'll be tortured if they lose, but it doesn't make sense why the Dominators' leaders and Ryan want this though. Isn't the point of this whole shebang to be an experiment to prove which method of training is stronger so Ryan can hone them and take credit for their power? Cheating would mean that each team isn't fighting with their full might. Unless Ryan considers cheating a skill? What's even stupider is the justification for Estrella to continue the tournament even after they find out the Dominators are cheating. They say that the cheating would nullify the results of the match, correct. So the results, win or lose, would not count as recorded, true. So basically, the whole event would be one giant tie, in practice. No? That's not how cheating works. The cheater broke the rules of the game, which is disqualification for them. That's what started this whole tournament mess in the first place. Estrella called out foul play and made the Dominators win invalid. The writers make the characters so brain dead when they need to be, and it makes it harder to cheer for anyone in this show when they're all just tools for the plot to progress and toys to be shown off. They're not actually characters, they're puppets. After the tournament is concluded, Ryan dresses the winners, Team Estrella, as the new Dominators. Not a good play per se, seeing as the whole plan hinged and succeeded on their hatred of the Dominators, and he's just revealed himself as Ryan from Dominators, the secret identity of Ryan from Dream. Ryan also reveals that the D in Dominators is the same as the D in Dream, which must be a branding nightmare. Ryan then monologues the whole plan to them for an entire episode, against any better judgment. I organized it all in chronological order. The show introduces all of this information out of order, but still in one uninterrupted info dump, which hides how truly inane it is. He then reveals to the Dominators in Estrella that he plans to take the winning team to the world of the other bay to have truly exciting battles. Team Estrella forgives all that domestic terrorism stuff and jumps at the chance to go to this new world. So Ryan's plan succeeded, right? I mean, he could probably just have used this new world thing to inspire the competitors to fight at full strength and skip the domestic terrorism and torture. It did inspire him to create an entire multi-billion company and convoluted scheme to create the ultimate wheeler, after all. I don't see why it couldn't have done the same thing to bring out the fighting potential of the competitors, but no, I guess the world's dumbest plot point works. Somehow. But whoops, Ryan from Dominators opens his damn mouth again, and he's a fascist! He wants to take over the new world with BeyWheelz, with Estrella as his army, because it's only natural that the strong should rule the weak. Okay, then. I guess that confirms that BeyWheelz are essentially guns, since that's how they're used. Why, oh why did he think this would work? Why is this his goal now? What is his goal, even? At first, it was to feel the excitement in battle, so he started researching the history of bays. A little weird, but it could have been soul-searching or hyperfixation. He found out about other bays, apparently only popular in another dimension, so he wants to go there. That makes sense on an emotional level, but after his injury, he can't go, at least on his own. He makes Dream to train good-hearted, strong wheelers. Logically, if his goal is to create strong bladers to live vicariously through, and show the new world, his plan should end here. But the writers need a villain, so at some point, wealth turns him into a Nazi who thinks the strong should rule the weak. I would say based, if that was an intentional message of the show and not just a happy accident, but BeyWheelz is indifferent to the relationship between guillotines and the ruling class. Unfortunately, no Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk slander here. The creation of the Dominators to be in a tournament only makes sense if the goal of the tournament was to see which training method was stronger for wheelers. In that case, terrorism or torture was not needed. Truly strong competitors would fight at full strength no matter what, under what seems to be Ryan's thinking. If he wanted to give them an incentive, tell them about the parallel universe they get to go to if they win. They'll go nuts. If his goal was interdimensional BeyWheelz fascism, a phrase I curse God for making me say, why have the tournament? Why not let Estrella fight as counter-terrorists? Why even care about who fought the terrorists at all if you weren't going to manipulate them into fighting for you? When Estrella undoubtedly says no to colonial fascism, he goes back to using his trained soldiers. Why not just use them from the start if you needed a group of evil people? And most infuriatingly of all, Ryan can pay battle. He has a gauntlet for it. He could fight strong opponents at any time, and if his goal was to have a match that mattered, why couldn't he have just used that? And why does it have steam coming out of it? It's a launcher strapped to his hand. That's it. It's manually activated. It's not like there's motors in there activating it. Why does it have exhaust? We literally see him letting it rip. What is it exhausting? Sweat? Is that sweat steam? Does the only type of battle that could matter to Ryan involve dominating weaker opponents and controlling the world, otherwise colonial fascism? He could have gone into the new world himself or led his trained army from the front lines. I'm going to stop questioning his goals now because so did the writers. I'm pretty sure they couldn't crack the plot of this series on time, so they had Ryan be whatever and do whatever needed to be done to let the plot outline happen. Ryan is not a consistent character in character, but meta-contextually, he is consistent. He moves the plot forward by helping the protagonists, so he can later move the plot forward by being the twist villain. I have a theory that no one working on the show had enough time or incentive to make the show of a passable quality, and I'm sure they all knew that. I doubt they're not self-aware human beings. Sometimes you have to make a bad show. You have to put food on the table somehow, and it might just be powered by Beyblade. But the show, nevertheless, is still bad. The script barely holds itself together with duct tape and broken dreams as it shambles to the finish line. The culmination of this writing conundrum is how the show ends. Much like Honest Abe. Not with a bang, but with a gunshot wound after the bang, slowly draining all of the lifeblood out of it. Ryan reveals that the planets will align and open the gate to the world of the other Bay the very next day. Estrella is free to change their minds and seemingly their ethical alignment and join him anytime before that. Of course, Estrella, being the protagonist, declined that invitation and all vote to infiltrate Dream HQ, overran by the Dominators and their foot soldiers in preparation for the big day. What ensues is your standard tower climb, "You go on without me, I'll handle him," fight. Kofi is fat-shamed out of the elevator to deal with some foot soldiers until he joins Marche and Nicole and the newly turned Gigante to beat a bulk of the Dominators in a glass room that can break and fix itself an infinite number of times. Give the background artists a break, they're working on BeyWheelz. Leon and Jin face off against leaders A and B, and it's about as exciting as those names would indicate. Sho is set up to fight Odin, who guards Ryan, but Odin finally has his change of heart, bringing him off the probationary friend status to fledgling friend status. Ryan commits tossy times on Odin for betraying him. Ryan laments this, as Odin is, just like him, I'll just play the clip.
You sad genius, you!
Yeah, that. This leads to a tender moment between him and Sho. How sweet. I would say Shoten moment, but relationships are for characters, not caricatures. The planets finally align, creating the
Space energy
necessary to open the gate to the other world without asymmetricalizing your character design. Sho's now on a timer to stop Ryan. The following fight between Sho and Ryan from Dominators is pretty much wholesale the final battle of Metal Fight Beyblade, or Metal Fusion if you're into that. Sho, like Ginga, waxes heroic about his friends, launches his Bey into space, and then slams it down onto his opponent with the new energy it's gotten. Except BeyWheelz does it objectively worse. It lacks the likable characters, themes, or actual stakes that the original does. In the Metal Fight finale, spoilers, Ginga has to save his own sworn enemy's life from being corrupted by a dark power that was shaped by the evils of humanity. Here, if the bad guy wins the toy battling game, he maybe escapes to the recently introduced other world if the very strong kids present in the building don't beat him up before he uses the gate. Sho's not even saving his world, a pretty lofty and tangible stake as is. He's saving a world we've never actually seen from a group of kinda rude terrorists who aren't even going to be fighting on their own turf. When Ginga launches his Beyblade into space, it's because he uses the thematically appropriate power of friendship to heal his opponent and wrap up the series' overarching thematic and emotional arcs. When Sho does it, he just uses the cosmic power from the planets aligning while crediting his friends in the special thanks section of the attack battle cry. Ironically, this little imitation scene does echo the motifs of its own series, shouting platitudes to mask the fact that there's no emotional substance to any action it's ever made. So yeah, Ryan from Dying is defeated and loses his heterochromia because, yeah, sure, whatever. And Team Estrella, now with the forgiven Gigante and Odin, head into the new world. Odin trembles at the opportunities of this new world and can't wait to make good on the second chance that he's been given. He never will, mind you, because he and every other character that aren't one of the main three won't appear in the sequel series, nor will any of the setup or implied lore from this season. BeyWheelz is not required viewing, even for its own sequel series, meaning that nothing has happened, and nothing has been of consequence, even to itself. Yay! There's also a weird hexagon thing that doesn't make any sense and it's never explained, but that doesn't matter at this point. There is no reason to watch BeyWheelz over Metal Fight. I mean, the series is powered by Beyblade, so you might as well go straight to the source. There is no element that BeyWheelz does better than Metal Fight, mostly since it stole all of those elements from Metal Fight. Metal Fight's over-the-top characters and action manages to actually go over the top and create a fun, bizarre adventure that you can watch with friends. BeyWheelz is just a lame, hollow echo of that. Any creativity or heart that began in the beginning of the BeyWheelz creative process clearly did not make it into the final product. is a franchise made because a piece of paper suggested that it could make the company more pieces of paper. It's soulless corporate schlock. It's what happens when you take a hobby anime, a genre that's usually injected with a lot of heart and weirdness, and reduce it down to its basic element, unfeeling capitalism. That's what the entire BeyWheelz sub-franchise is, an uninspired gambit for Hasbro to milk even more money out of Beyblade, one of the most popular toys at the time. Arguably, the brand did damage to the image of Beyblade. When people say, remember when they turned Beyblade into wheels, it's as if they're talking about it peeing its pants in a class presentation. Widely, the series is just considered a joke, which it is, just not a funny one. It's so hard to actually gauge the success of the series, because it got a sequel, arguably two, but it was supposed to have even more than that. While BeyWheelz was supposed to open up more avenues of Beys that Hasbro could release, all it did was leave another stain on the already infamous decline of the Metal Fight series.
Why did you do that for over an hour?
Someone had to, Cody.
No, they didn't.
No. I guess, you're right. I guess someone really didn't have to do this, huh?
So yeah, after Cody was able to restrain me and sedate me a little bit, I ended up here to, cool down for the past 3 hours. So, I've been trying to think of, a single good thing about BeyWheelz so I can get over this whole hill, and at least they never made the Dominator's name weird. Like, they never said anything to make it explicitly, bad with the context that name holds.
Plus, since I'm a Dominator, I'm free to do whatever I want, whenever I want. Understand?
Never mind then, I'm going to go back to atoning. This is fine! I'm okay!